So this is bite number 2, and we're having a meal of how to actually bring about criminal justice realignment into the collective atmosphere so that people recognize how important it is.
Yes.
And to bring forth you as the sheriff that is somebody who is committed to the programs. So one of the things when I was looking at justice, criminal justice realignment, was I was feeling like they created a bill, and in that bill they created some demands. And they put these demands into the local structure system, which is, like you as the potential sheriff, and then say, do it. And then it really is up to those individuals to actually build those programs. It's not innate, correct? They're just not there. So you really have to be proactive.
Yes.
And in a way that, and take responsibility to build these programs out in order to make them happen. And if it's not your priority in the county, it won't happen. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the government's very smart at getting people to, or local governments to do what the direction is that they want to go in. And so they do this by making funding available. The funding that's available has to be used towards programs that are designed to further the goals of realignment. They don't just have this pool of money set there for the sheriff to come take and do with it what he wants. It needs to be used in a manner that furthers the goals of realignment. So there are practices that are in place, or they're known as evidence-based practices, and there's things that have been shown historically to reduce recidivism through programs.
For those who don't understand what recidivism is, would you please describe that?
That's just the recidivism is the tendency of a person to re-offend and go back to committing crimes again.
So they become a professional criminal and continuously go back into the system?
Our goal is to prevent that.
Exactly, but
yes.
is recidivism?
Right now there's no hard and fast definition of recidivism.
Okay.
That's one of the issues that's coming along with realignment. It's a very new thing, and there is not yet a statewide definition of what recidivism is. Each county right now can make its own definition of what it considers recidivism. Is it a person who gets arrested for a misdemeanor? Is it a person who gets arrested for a felony? Or is it a person who gets convicted of a misdemeanor or felony? Or is it a person who simply violates one of the terms of their probation or early release? So right now there's not a statewide definition to define what recidivism is, and that's one thing that the legislature is going to work on in the near future and come up with a common definition so that we can measure success rates in realignment.
With that word, can you say how you would like it described in a way that supports criminal justice realignment and success? How would you describe it?
I would like to see the definition of recidivism definitely be something more than just a misdemeanor arrest. I think the fact that a person's simply arrested doesn't necessarily mean they're obviously not guilty of a crime, and I think there has to be some kind of conviction attached to it. The system has to be set up with the understanding that nobody's going to get it right the first time. And in order to measure, we can't call somebody a failure for every little slip that they have along the way. But there does need to be a point where we recognize, yeah, that person hasn't made it and they failed in the process. So my personal desire would be something with a higher threshold, maybe a conviction for a serious misdemeanor or a felony. But I definitely think there needs to be some sort of definition attached to it so we can measure our success or our failure and see where we need to improve and why.
Thank you for that clarification.
So some of the programs that are in place, there's right now what we're doing here on a local level is we contract with a company called BI Incorporated. They're a multinational corporation, and they do programming in jails, in prisons, and in day reporting centers. We have a day reporting center here in Lake County. There's actually 2. There's one in Clear Lake and one in Lakeport. And so our supervised offenders are, some of them are currently ordered to participate in programs, and they have education programs and employment programs. There's a substance abuse counselor on scene to address those types of needs. And every person that participates goes through kind of an offender's needs assessment. So they'll interview them, go over their social history, look at what kinds of things they need to do to change their behavior and get them on the right track, and really tailor a program that's designed to ensure that they succeed. In times past, what we had seen is you might have a person get out of prison and released to a parole officer, and the parole officer might tell him, don't hang around with your criminal friends and go get a job. Well, those are some really lofty goals, and for anybody that's been in a job search, even without a criminal history, sometimes it's very difficult to find a job. So the program that we have set up isn't necessarily to get them a job, but it's to give them the tools on how they can become employed and how they can make decisions and learn how to control their behavior and make the right decisions in steering away from that life of criminality and towards a more productive life.
You spoke about the job that you have now and how that applies. Could you speak a little bit more about where you are now and where you want to go as the sheriff?
Yes. Well, like I say, I was 20 years as a police officer and deputy sheriff. I really had a paradigm shift coming into this job. I'm the assistant chief probation officer in the county. And coming into this job, I was still of the mindset that we go out and we get people and we lock them up, and that's what we do. Having the opportunity to work over the last several months in a probation environment, I see that there's a whole lot more to it. And it's going to require a great deal of cooperation between agencies. This isn't something that the probation department can do on its own. It's the programs that are in place have a greater chance of succeeding if people start participating in them at the earliest phase possible. And for some of those people, the earliest time that they can participate in those programs is when they get arrested and they get put in jail. They're a captive audience. We can offer programs. We can certainly assess them and determine what their needs are at the time and offer those programs to them and get them started on the program before they're even released. If there's 15 steps to the program and they can complete 7 or 8 of the steps while they're in custody and be released to probation on the outside, they're halfway there instead of starting from day one once they get released. And I think their chance of success will be greater because they'll already have some time and effort invested in the program, and that needs to happen. We have to have that level of cooperation between the Sheriff's Department, the Probation Department, and the company that we contract with, as well as the Community Corrections Partnership. My goal in seeking office as the sheriff is I have a track record of working well with other agencies and people in other agencies, and I want to restore the relationships that are necessary for this to succeed.
In the larger arc of the criminal world and how people are affected by the way in which they're incarcerated, how does criminal justice realignment affect the way they're treated, and then how ultimately that affects the way in which they can step back out into the community in a way that adds their gifts versus actually stealing or taking away from the community?
Yes. As I said earlier, I don't think this is something that will affect every person that's incarcerated. I'm not naive to the fact that there are people that choose to follow a life of crime. It's easier for them, and they simply choose to follow that life. And for those, these programs aren't likely to succeed. It's for the other people that didn't have any kind of opportunity before. If you got arrested for something, you got locked up basically, and you got warehoused, and like I said, they just made you a better criminal. They didn't look towards the underlying needs, and we're kind of taking a shift away from that. The legislature came up with a whole body of laws. The non-sex offenses, non-violent, non-serious crimes that people are prosecuted for are no longer going to state prison. They might serve their time in local county jail. And there, instead, had they gone to state prison before, they would have just been locked up. They might have come out a more sophisticated criminal, but now, when we have local control over them, we can figure out what their needs are. Before, there wasn't a whole lot of that going on. There wasn't much of that going on in the county jails. An example I like to give in how this might be put into practice is you might have a 19 or 20-year-old young man who gets caught breaking into cars, and he's stealing cell phones or cameras or change or whatever he can. And in times past, they might have just arrested him and prosecuted him for burglary and sent him to prison for 3 years. And in 3 years, he'd come out and he'd probably be doing something more serious.
Be a better criminal.
He'd be a better criminal. Well, now, with realignment, the goal is to find a person like that, seek them out, have some kind of interaction and dialogue with them, and figure out what it is. Why is it that you're committing these crimes? And a common example that we might see is You got a young man who decides he's not going to finish high school, he drops out, and then he might get his girlfriend pregnant. Now he's got a mouth to feed at home, and without a high school diploma, he can't get a job. But he's got a mouth to feed, and so he turns to a life of crime in order just simply to survive. Before, there wouldn't have been a whole lot of opportunity. 3 years later, he would have come out of prison, still without any kind of GED or high school diploma, but now we identify what it is that causes him to commit those crimes and point him in the right direction. We'll point him in the direction where he can maybe work on his GED while he's in custody and go through some employment education and learn how to take an interview, how to dress for an interview, how to apply for jobs, how to write a cover letter, how to write a resume, and really invest some time in that person. People ask, do you think it's going to work every time? It's not going to work every time. But if we can keep somebody out of prison, that's over $30,000 a year that we're saving. So it's a good investment. To date in this county, we've had 17 people graduate since the inception of the BI program. Our last class graduation was 7 people in spring, and it was 10 in the class before that. And those people they're going on, and one of the requirements is that they get a job. We have a partnership with some of our local businesses here that have expressed a willingness to hire people with criminal records, even if they have a criminal record, they're willing to give them a job and give them a chance. And so now people can come out, instead of going and applying for a job and just saying, "Yeah, I got a criminal record," they can say, "Well, I got a criminal record, but this is what I'm doing to improve myself, and this is why you should hire me."
And this is why I wanted to interview you, was specifically that you create hope in situations that sometimes feel hopeless.
Yes, it is for everybody. It's everybody in the community tends to benefit from this. It's something where if we get the vast majority of crime is committed by a small minority of the population. So if we can identify the people that are in need of those types of services and get them the help that they want, hopefully we'll reach the goal of reducing crime overall.
That is exactly what we want. Thank you.
Thank you.